and welcome to It's a Boat Thing, Not So Technical. Today we are going to be looking at winterising the boat. It's a job that most of us do each and every year. Sometimes you get a contractor in, sometimes you do it yourself, but hopefully you'll pick up a few hints and tips along the way. I'm going to be crawling around inside the engine bay. Today's main job is twofold. Firstly, I'm going to be changing the oil and the oil filter on the engine. Secondly, I'm going to be looking at putting coolant through the raw water system, which will stop it from freezing up. It's an antifreeze that can go down to about -40. I'll show you how we do that. Very straightforward on this particular boat, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, first things first, we've got to warm up the engine to warm up the engine oil. Not to get the engine or the engine oil too hot, just to warm it so when you come to pump it out, it flows freely. We haven't done many engine hours this year, so I'm expecting the engine oil to be fairly clean. But before we get into that, we need to open up the seacocks, we need to get the engine running and get the engine warm. I'm going to show you how we access our engine. Now, this is our engine in our hold. I'm going to attempt to get down into the hold and show you where our seacock is. As you can see, it's tucked right over the back. To turn that on, you literally open the valve, and that makes sure that the seacock is open. It's ready to take in the raw intake of the water from the outside of the boat, and that will take it through the strainer, which is just in there. That strainer does what it says on the tin. It strains the water, any particles in it, it keeps in the basket in there, and then takes it into here, which is the heat exchanger, which will cool the internal coolant that flows around the engine. Now, the observant of you may notice that we actually have a transverse engine. So most boats with a propeller, as we have, are normally inline, and out the back of the gearbox there will be the propeller shaft. We don't have that. We have a hydraulic drive system, which I will get into a bit later on another not so technical, but essentially our engine is transverse. Once we're down in the engine room, we will be also looking at all the movable parts on the engine, and that will be re-greasing any of the movable linkages or rods, making sure everything is clean, because you can see if there's any leakages around anything on the engine with that, checking the alternator, and obviously making sure there's no leaks from what we have as a hydraulic drive system to our propeller that lays underneath where the engine is housed. And we're going to start with the engine oil. That's going to be my first job. Now, this particular engine takes 15 W40, give or take around 8 litres. To drain the oil, you need a receptacle. So we have a robust plastic receptacle to drain the oil into. Obviously, jugs and funnels for putting the engine oil back into the engine. Now, our particular engine has a pump system on it, so we use a pipe to get it from that pump into that receptacle. Now we have the C valve open, so we have free running of water. We have our components and our kit ready to go. It's time to start the engine and get the boat warmed up. We go for starting the engine to get it warmed up. So now the engine is running. You can hear it's a little noisy as the engine cover's not on it. We are a diesel motor after all, and we'll just check that there is free flowing water coming out of the back exhaust. Now, of course, while the engine's warming up, there's very little we can do. We'll take, give or take, between 5 and 10 minutes. So I think it's time for a cup of tea. So while the kettle is boiling, make a well-earned cup of tea so far. Can't do any jobs without it. We are going to refill these for the winter. Now, these are moisture traps. We use moisture trap crystals, which are these. We've always found them very good. They actually smell quite nice as well. The way we do that is we literally take off the top we're going to give it a clean out, because you can see it's a little bit gungy from where we used it before. Take this lid off and fill it up with new crystals. We take the lid off, it's as easy as that. We get our damp control crystals. I'm trying to do this one handy without getting everything everywhere. You just top this up. It's as simple as that. We put the lid back on, and we're going to put that where it needs to be. Now we've done this, I'll go and put this one in the front. Okay, so time to turn the engine off. That should be warmed up enough. Get back down into the engine bay, and let's put our hoses on the pump and get emptying out the sump oil ready to put fresh inside. As you can see, what we're doing here, we're just putting the hose that will take the oil from the pump, put it into the receptacle that we have bought. It needs to be a little bit tight to make sure it doesn't leak when we start pumping it out. I'm probably making quite a meal out of this, but I'd rather it be a snug fit, not go everywhere, because that means that it's going to take a bit of clearing up. Now I've been going with this small pump for about 5 or 6 minutes or so. The oil is almost out. I will keep going until there's absolutely no more oil I can get out. I always tend to put a little bit of fresh in the top and then pump that through if I can as well, just to make sure there's no residual left in there. And then we're ready to put the new engine oil in properly. So the job, I think, is actually the messiest job that we do on this particular type of engine when we're doing an oil filter change, is taking the filter out. Now I'm expecting it to weep all the way around here as I take it out. There's going to be plenty of paper towel just underneath to soak up any of the drips that come out, and we'll try and get that from that position and into a disposable container as quickly as we can to minimise the actual mess that it can make. So now we've got that loose, we'll take off the oil filter, replace it with the new one, tighten it back up, making sure obviously to lubricate the ring that's inside when we put the new one back on, and then we're good to go with filling up the engine oil. So once we start filling the oil, obviously we need to check it. That's done by means of the dipstick. You can see we haven't got any in there just yet, but as we fill it up, we will check the quantity as we go on that stick. This is where we're going to be putting the fresh oil in. I've already measured out 2 litres, and I will be putting in 2 litres at a time, just under the 8 litres that is required by the engine, and then I will start to check the oil level, and by that time we will go, rather than measuring exactly, we will go on the dipstick. Then of course we start the engine, get the engine oil flowing around the engine, and then we will recheck on the dipstick and top up as necessary. So in goes the first 2 litres fresh oil. Put it in a little bit at a time, just let the air escape out the oil filler neck. Okay, let's put litre 7, the 7.5 in there. Again, looking at the dipstick, I'm fairly confident where we need to be. I'm going to check this now, just to make sure. And to me, that's about 1/3 of the way up the line. Let's bring you over to here so you can see. I'm just going to turn it on. Get that in there. You may be able to see about 1/3 of the way up the line there. I'm going to start the engine, run it for a second or two, just so it spreads the oil around the engine, and then we'll recheck and top up as needed. Now the coolant that we're going to be using is a special marine coolant, so it doesn't damage the wildlife obviously that lives in the water or is dangerous to any of the birds or such like that live in and around the marina where we keep the boat. This one particularly goes down to about -40. You put it through the raw water intake, it goes through the strainer, sits inside the heat exchanger and all inside the exhaust system before it pops out, obviously out the stern of the boat, under its normal circulation of cool water. But it will sit in there during the winter, and that has an anti-corrosive effect, which is a good thing. It also has a lubricative effect, which is another good thing, and that should see you right until you come to start the engine and recommission the engine in the springtime. So a couple of things we need to prepare first off. The antifreeze solution, obviously. Now I find it easier putting it in and decanting that out of that container into a bucket or two, mainly because it pours easier. But then when we are trying to get it into the strainer, I have to say I'm a little bit more accurate with it from the bucket rather than straight from the container. Now the plan is to pour the bucket full of antifreeze solution directly into that. Now we've already turned off the seacock, so that means that there's no water coming in from the outside of the boat, because we just want to put pure antifreeze solution in it. And then the next thing that we need to do is to look out the back just to make sure that that antifreeze solution is coming all the way through. Okay, so I'm going to try and do a number of things at the same time, and any of you that know me knows that's quite a tall order. Anyway, I am going to fill up the basket strainer with antifreeze, then I'm going to turn on the engine, come immediately back to carry on filling up that basket with the antifreeze I've already put into the buckets earlier until that antifreeze goes out of the exhaust. That tells me the entire system has antifreeze coolant in it, there's no air bubbles, and everything is coated in that rust inhibitor to keep the system safe during the winter. So the basket is mostly full with antifreeze. Here goes, I'm going to turn the engine on. And immediately you can see that that coolant disappears from the basket. I'm now keeping that basket full. I've got a wary eye looking out the back at the same time to make sure that the coolant is going all the way through the system. And I can tell that because they've got a handy pink colour into the antifreeze, so I can see when it's all the way through and coming all the way out, and I think that's about there. We immediately turn off the engine, so we're not pumping any more than we need to through. I'm going to finish topping up that basket so we get all the air bubbles out from the input side of it. And there we go. Now of course it's time for me to clear up the mess that I made where I overspilt. Just a matter of mopping it up with a bit of paper towel. As you can see, after a little bit of cleaning up, wiping down, the lid of the strainer's ready to go back on. That's that job done for another year. So the last job is to actually put a no start indicator where the ignition key goes, so we don't ruin all the hard work we've just done by putting the antifreeze in the raw intake water system. Now one of the other jobs that we're going to do is we're going to be draining down the cold water system today as well. Now this is so we don't have any lime water in any of the pipes, and that shouldn't freeze. We do this first, I can close all the valves, and then I can run off the calorifer, which is where the hot water would be heated up, and that will stop that freezing up as well. There you go, another basic winterisation done. We've changed the oil, we've changed the oil filter, with antifreeze coolant through the raw water intake system. We've even run down and emptied the water tanks, the calorifer, just to make sure those pipes don't freeze up as the temperatures begin to drop. Anyway, as always, if you like what you see, please comment below. We would love to hear from you. Subscribe button is over here in the corner, and we'll see you next time.